Decided today, no presentations as such. We're going to do a couple of short videos and then just do a live demo. I think that's the best way for you to see this technology, and then we can hopefully have some time for questions at the end. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Please raise your hand, speak out, ask any questions, pop them in the chat. Myself and Anya will manage that this afternoon. So I'm going to hand over to Ollie, who's just going to give us a brief introduction, and then we'll get going making a socket. Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so what we're going to do today is make a socket directly on Mitch. So you can imagine the benefits that this gives to patients with the fact you can turn up to a centre and then within 2 hours you can leave with a perfectly fitting brand new socket, which is kind of unheard of, I think, in quite a lot of modern day practices. It's called Direct Socket TF. We also have Direct Socket TT, so we have a transtibial, a below the knee version, and we have a transfemoral and above the knee version now too. And even though it's a new product in the UK, we have actually had it in our Nordic market for about the past 6 years. So we actually have quite a hefty body of evidence about direct socket. We have 2 published clinical studies as well. But as Katie says, the most interesting thing is seeing how it's actually done. So we're going to run through a quick guidance video here. The reasons, just because this is also available on YouTube, and we always recommend that if people are having a direct socket made, that they actually watch the video in advance. It does explain a lot of what's going to happen, because normally it's very, very new for you guys, and it's also very new for the prosthetist as well that see you. So the type of sockets that we make, they look like this. So they're actually sub-ischial sockets, and sub-ischial sockets means it sits below kind of that sitting bone that you normally sit on with a socket. We have a really nice, soft, flexible edge. You can see how flexible that is. And then this has so many benefits in terms of sitting comfort, sitting on a chair, sitting in a car for a long period of time, sitting on the loo, kind of that thing that everyone has to do every day. Cosmetic benefits, so we have a really nice flexible lateral edge. You don't have anything stuck out your clothes anymore. They're really small, they're really neat as well. They're very, very narrow sockets too, so they're really cosmetic. No more wearing holes in the back of your clothes, in your pants or your trousers. That's all completely gone now as well. It doesn't come without kind of a little bit of work, so you actually have to make the socket work for you, but the benefits that you get from that, if it does work, are absolutely phenomenal. So starting from the beginning, I'm just going to play this video behind me. So as I said, this is available on YouTube as well. Just so we're going to chat through bits and bobs. So the key to this whole process is preparation. So this guy here, he has everything prepped. We know people are coming in for direct sockets. We have it just prepped over here as well, because we knew that's what Mitch was coming in for. So we have everything ready. And if you have everything ready, it's a very seamless process. So he's just prepping a few bits of tooling here. Patient comes in, and you can see that there are actually 2 people in blue shirts. And the reason for that is because it's a 2-person job. It doesn't have to be 2 prosthetists. It could be a prosthetist and physio, prosthetist and technician, but it's definitely a 2-person job. You'll see why when myself and Katie make the socket as well. So patient comes in, door shuts behind them, and the reason why we have the door shut behind them is because the guy that invented this whole process is a guy called Anton Johansson, who is one of our Swedish colleagues. And his whole philosophy is that when people come into the centre to have a socket made, we shouldn't have to leave the room until that socket's done. And I'm sure it's happened to everyone. You come in, it's your appointment time, someone needs to go and find a pen, and they're gone 20-25 minutes, because when they've gone to find a pen, kind of they've found the technician, or the phone's rung, or something else has happened, and you're sat there thinking, they went to find a pen. So actually this whole process shouldn't be disturbed at all until that socket is complete. So patient comes in, a quick residual limb assessment, so there's nothing untoward here that we have to take care of. It's more just as we would do for any transfemoral socket making. And then we measure for a liner, because we actually make these sockets over ice ross liners. So we have a special casting liner here that we're just rolling on, and this is what we make the socket over the top of. And the reason for that is because the casting liners that we use are a specific thickness, so that when we fit it with a liner for a definitive kind of delivery, it's the perfect volume as well, because it's a very much hands-off process. So it's not influenced by myself or Katie. We just let the process do the work, and the results speak for themselves as well. So you can see the liner goes on. I'm just testing the liner size here. And then once that's done, the good news for everyone having one of these made is all you have to do is lie on your side. So it's a really relaxing process. And you can see this guy here has the world's thickest pillow. Unfortunately, we don't quite have Swedish spec pillows here, but Mitch will be all right anyway. So being able to lie on your side is really relaxing. It's a really nice process, and we always make these on height adjustable kind of either seats or plinths as well, so that when we are making the sockets, number one, I don't have to bend over to make the socket, and number two, you're at my height, so we can actually have a face-to-face conversation rather than looking up or looking down on people. And also, it's just a nice place to be. So we had people fall asleep. Mitch might do that for you today, depending what state he's in. Had people fall asleep, watch cricket on their phone, done some work on their laptop. It's literally, you can just relax, and we can make the socket in that. So it's a really nice place to be. So patients lie on their side. And then the first thing we do is you just put some insulating sheeting on, not because it's a messy process, just because we're using kind of wet resin on the user, so just to make sure that no nasty accidents will happen. And then we start to make the socket. So we have this special silicone sheeting. This is what does a lot of the work for us. You can see it's quite tight. It's being pulled on by the frame here. And what this will do is this will kind of compress the soft tissue of the residual limb, and this is already kind of reducing the volume to make the socket the perfect size. So it's quite tight to get on, so which is why we use this frame, and also it just means we're not kind of really pulling on your leg as well to make things a bit more comfortable for you. So pull the isolating sheet out, and then it may seem a bit odd, but we actually strap you down to the couch with bungee cords. And the reason for that is because we need to keep that white sheeting under tension, and then we also need to make sure that you don't move around too much as well. So once that's done, next thing we do is you measure for a brim. So the brims, Giles, if you just pop back to the other one, the brims that we have, they come separate to the socket. So you can see this is a separate brim. This is one that's manufactured into the socket. So the brims come separate. And what we do is we take a circumferential measure. So we just take literally just a measure around the top of your leg. And then we have various different sizes of these. We actually have about 13 different sizes from about size 40 up to 70. And we can see that the shape of the brim is a little bit anatomical. So you have a lateral side here, so the outside of your leg, and a medial side here, which is on the inside of your leg. And this is just put on in the correct position, and this is what makes the top trim line of your socket. So the trim line and the edge is already done. So when you come to put the socket on when it's manufactured, there is nothing you need to change because it's already done on you. So we have a good agreement with your patient when you're making this, that this is exactly where it needs to be, and then we just manufacture the socket over the top of that. So there's never any kind of issues with like digging in the groin or too high at the back or too high at the side. It's just made from the start, so we don't have any of that problem at all. So measuring for the brim, we then pull the brim up onto that white sheeting, and we want to make sure this is a nice snug fit. And then once we're happy with its position, we just tape it down. And then eventually we will trim off the excess sheeting from the bottom, and we use a silicone cap in order to just isolate the rest of the liner from the resin. Now you can see we're rolling kind of a braid looking kind of material onto the actual patient themselves. And this is how the sockets start off. So it's not kind of like an impregnated braid with resin already. It's two separate parts. So this is the braid that we actually use. And this material, you can see it's kind of a bronzy colour. This is actually basalt, and basalt is basically volcanic rock, and it's made into a braid, and that's what we use. And the reason why we use basalt is because it's really lightweight, it's very, very strong. So all the sockets are rated to 166 kilos, which is about 25.5 stone, I think. It's really strong. Also doesn't make you itch. So if you ever come across glass or carbon fibre, if you get that on your skin, it does make it a bit itchy because it's a bit of an irritant. And also the fibres are heavy. So when we trim the braid, the fibres drop directly to the floor. They don't fly up into the air. So it's a much nicer material to work with as well. And this is really flexible. And we have certain different widths of these as well. So we can actually change the size of braid if we need to, if someone has a larger or a smaller leg along the line. So all we're doing here is just rolling the braid on. So as the braid rolls up, we then need to give it a quick trim. So we just give it a bit of a mark with a marker pen, and then we just take that back off, and we just cut it with some scissors, just because we have too much bulk otherwise. Now with these type of sockets, we can make them fit with either a locking liner, so one with actually like a physical mechanical pin and lock, or we can make it fit with a sealing liner, which is our kind of our suction fitting sockets. And no matter which suspension method we're actually going to use, we always do the same manufacturing method. So the benefit of that is the sockets are really versatile. So if you have a sealing liner, they want to go back to locking, or locking liner, they want to go back to sealing, then you don't have to remake the socket. You can just change the distal adapter, and then the socket is still exactly the same. So really quite versatile sockets. The key to this is if you are going to make it a sealing socket, don't forget the former for the valve. So we can see on this socket here, we have the valve already manufactured into it, and that's what that red piece does. That just makes a space for that valve to sit into. So once that's done, we then roll the braid back over the top, and we just connect that in place so that that will no longer move. And then we roll the braids up so they're all nice and flat against that first layer of silicone. And then finally, we put the second layer of silicone over the top. So you can see here, what we're basically doing is we've sandwiched the braid between two layers of that silicone sheeting, and then we just connect it to the same bungee cords that we used before, once again to keep that really nicely under tension as well. So once that's on, we then can just tape the distal end to make sure that we don't have resin coming back out the bottom. So we're just trimming that away. And then the resin that we use is actually a, oh, hang on, sorry, wrong button. The resin that we use is actually a polyurethane resin. So, here we go. It's actually polyurethane resin, so it needs a bit of a shake because it's got a black pigment in it. And then the resin actually, when it cures, it gets to about 35 degrees, so it's not uncomfortable, it's just like a nice warm bath. We do put safety glasses on because it's better to be safe than sorry, although it's not actually a messy process. And then you can see we're now injecting the resin into that braid that we sandwiched between those two layers of silicone sheeting, and the guy is here starting to spread it out with his hands. You can see onto the braid where that resin's actually got to, so he's just making sure everything is well covered onto that brim. Once it's done, we can disconnect the resin, and then while the resin's curing, what we need to happen is that the patients having the socket made just kind of tense and relax their muscles a bit, because what we're trying to do is in the socket shape that we make is actually make kind of a space for those muscles to contract and relax into. If you don't have space for that, all that happens is your socket twists a lot when you're walking and your legs swinging through, because the sockets are so snug that there's nowhere for your muscles to go into. So that's quite an important step. So we normally have a bit of a practice of that with our physiotherapists before we start to make sockets, just to make sure that patients know the muscle movement that they need to do, and also can actually do it when we ask them to do it as well. So that's normally after about 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes of the resin setting. Takes 10 minutes to set, 30 minutes to fully cure. So by the time it's trimmed and everything's bolted together, it's as strong as it will be. But 10 minutes to set, so it's quite a nice time. So it gives you plenty of time to string the resin out. And then also it's not too much of a panic in order to make sure it's well made as well. So carrying on, disconnect the resin, just make sure everything is well kind of impregnated into that braid and the brim as well. And then once the resin is cured, we just disconnect all of our isolation tools and tooling as well, and then the socket just slides away like so. So the socket's now manufactured, it just needs a quick trim in the workshop. So that just goes into the workshop, just a quick router, and you just literally trim it all the way around the edge. So all the way down to that flexible brim, which you can now see has manufactured it in. Grind out the valve former so we can install the correct kind of suspension tools as well. Block up the distal end. We just give it a bit of a polish with some sandpaper to make sure that it's not rough. And then when we come to fit the sockets, what you can see is that the top edge of the socket was actually folded kind of over the top of the socket itself. So if I do it with this one, you can see how different it looks. And the reason for that is because it makes life much easier to be able to put the socket on when this whole part is out of the way. To make sure that it doesn't kind of get caught when you're putting the socket on, basically. So we don't want this to happen as you're donning the socket. So turn it over the inside out, so over the top, and then use plenty of spray. If you have a sealing liner, if you're a locking liner, you don't have to worry about spray. You can just push down straight into it. And then what we'll see here is he's just pushing down into the socket, and when he gets most away, he then just folds the brim back up again. He's very happy. And then away you go to physio. So the nice thing about this is that the socket's now made. It just needs a bit of kind of maybe half an hour of physiotherapy in order to learn how that different socket feels and to get used to it, and to really start to kind of control that socket for you. And then literally once you're happy, away you go, and that is the socket actually made. So you can see in a 5-minute video it looks quite easy. There's maybe a few more stages to it than that, but it's quite an interesting thing to watch. but not as interesting as when we do it live. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to put some gloves on. We're going to make Mitch assume the position on his side, and then over the next 20 minutes we'll just go ahead and make a socket, and I'll explain what I'm doing as I go. If you have any questions at all, Anya is monitoring the chat, so she will read out or just give me a shout when there is a question. I'll do my best to answer it as we go as well. And Giles is on the camera, so I'm really sorry if we stand in front of the cameras at times, but we just have to move around a little bit as we make the sockets as well. So I'm just going to go over here and start making a socket with Mitch. Splendid. So we can see that Mitch is on his side with his nice comfy pillow. That camera, that's fine. So the thing I get told off most about is that I put Mitch on the height adjustable couch and then I forget to adjust the height. So I'm just going to lift Mitch up a bit. It was lower so he could actually get on it. So you can only lift the couch up to the, excuse me for the noise, it's like I'm about to take off.
And then Ollie always makes it way too high for me, and I spend the whole time on my tiptoes.
So Giles is going to control the cameras for us. So we have this view here. We also have a sideways view as well. And we also have a lovely top-down view too. So if you ever see the cameras change, so this is now a top-down view, so you can see Mitch's leg here.
However, you didn't take into account the fact that you moved the couch.
Apart from I moved the couch. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so if we pop back to maybe the overview. So the one that Katie stood in front of. Perfect. so the first thing we're going to do is Mitch has the casting liner on. So remember from the video, we put the casting liner on. We put it in the correct alignment first of all. And then what we're going to do now is use that plastic sheeting in order to cover Mitch over. Not because it's a messy process, but just in case. And the nice thing about this, we had lots of comments that it's actually, people feel it's quite a dignified process. It's no longer kind of you're stood up between bars balancing on one leg for 15 minutes getting covered in wet plaster. You're lying down on a nice comfy couch and we'll cover you up with plastic so you feel kind of quite contained as well. So in order to do that, we have the liner in the right place. We're just going to roll the top edge down so we have something to trap the plastic into, like so. And then we're just going to pull this plastic over the top of the liner, like so, and then we're going to trap the ears in the liner as we roll this liner back up again, just to make sure that everything is well covered. Kind of need 3 hands for this, don't we? But okay. We'll be okay.
You all right there, Mitch?
Yes, thank you. And we'll keep you nice and warm. So we're just pulling this liner up just to make sure everything is well contained, because we need to make sure that if we do have a resin spillage, that nothing can get on Mitch's skin at all, to keep him nice and clean and tidy. Okay, so the liner is in the correct place. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take this pin out. I just use this pin in order to check the alignment. And the first thing we're going to do is to use our first layer of insulating sheet. So remember we had that kind of plastic sheeting. We put this onto the frame now. We've marked it so we know where the outside is, and we're just going to push this up over the top of Mitch's leg, like so. We're going to hold the top edge of that nice and firmly, and we're just going to pull that sheeting away, like so. So it's quite a nice thing to have done. We're not pulling up onto your leg too much. And then we unleash the favoured bungee cord. So Katie's just going to pull that for me. Just put a tiny hole in that. We're going to put one at the side, at the front, one at the back, and we're going to go one just on the outside as well, just to make sure that Mitch has plenty of support for his leg. So you can see we've put some holes in this sheeting, and we just connect the bungee cords to any part of the couch that's not going to come off, like so. Hang on. I think that's a bit dubious. Go for this. So we go through the gap in the couch, and then we hook it onto the hole that we've made. And the bungee cords that we use are actually length adjustable. So I'm now going to just snug this one up a little bit, just to give it a bit more tension. And I'm going to help Katie with this back one as well. So we just connect it to the same plate as before. Hook that onto there, and then just tighten it up a bit as 2. That's it. Perfect. And now we're just one on the lateral side as well, just to help Mitch keep his leg up so it's a bit more of a
too noisy, maybe.
Okay, perfect. So we can see all those bungee cords, everything is now nice and kind of laying flat. It all looks a bit neater than we had before. You can see that we have some kind of wrinkles in the actual sheeting. It doesn't matter because this part's outside the realms of the socket anyway. So once that's in place, next thing we need to do is measure for the brim size. So we just use an Ossur tape measure, and we just go round the top of the thigh here, and we just take a circumference, and we get to 49. We don't have a size 49, we have a size 50 or a 47.5, so we're going to use size 47.5 in order to put that on. And with the brims, the sizes that we have, they're actually on the lateral point here. So we always try and get the size just where kind of your top of your thigh is, to make sure you have something to eye it up with. So to pull this on, I'm gonna hold this excess that we have here at the bottom, and then we're just gonna slide this up. And Mitch actually wants this one for his cycling trip is going on next week in America, so we're gonna make this a little bit lower than normal. Not that that's a standard thing, but we're just making sure that that's in the correct orientation. Try not to get too much plastic trapped in it as we go. Okay, what do you reckon?
Just a little bit lower.
A little bit lower?
Yeah.
So the good thing about this is you can see, you can feel where the top edge of your socket is going to be already. We can feel all the way around. So we can have a firm handshake when we're happy as to where this needs to go. Mitch is saying a little bit lower, so we're just going to tease that down just a smidge. How's that? So you can see there's no stress with this.
Yeah.
Happy?
Yeah, yeah.
So the first thing, there's no stress to this. We can actually agree that this is exactly where it has to go. And you can see that this edge now is a bit curled up, so it starts to try to roll itself up. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to tape this down with some porous tape, mainly to make sure that when we string resin over the top of this, it goes up over the top and not underneath where we don't want it to go to. So the tape that we have, it's kind of the Physio K tape. It's just this black tape, 25mm. We just pull that around. It has a little bit of stretch to it to make sure that we can literally tighten that edge down a little bit, but not so much that we're kind of causing a constriction around Mitch's leg. So we're going to go all the way around here, pushing that edge down as we go, and we're going to go around twice to make sure that it's well stuck. There we go. Pass it back to Katie. Bit more of a stretch, lovely. And we're just going to tape that all the way around the edge. You won't actually see this on the inside of the socket because the resin that we use is black on black. So it will just disappear, but the fact that it's porous means that the resin goes all the way through it, and we don't have to worry that we're going to end up with a dry spot around the edge. If we have too much, we just snip it off, and then we just stick that edge down like so. Next thing we do, we have some excess sheeting here. In fact, what I might do, since I moved the couch, is just, there we go, trim this excess off here, and then we can use our isolating cap. So I don't need this hanging off the bottom edge. Just with a sharp pair of scissors, just trim all the way around the umbrella. The umbrella is the hard part at the bottom of the liner, if you're wondering what I'm talking about. I haven't gone mad. So trim that off. And then we have our silicone cap that it just kind of looks like the bottom of a liner, basically. There we go, bottom of the liner. So we just pull that on, and that just stretches over the bottom and silicone and sticks to itself, like so. Next thing we do is we're going to pop the metal pin in that we had before, because now is the easiest time to do it. We're also just covering up Mitch's leg, because otherwise I tickle him with the braid and it gets quite irritating. So we're just putting this pin back in, like so. And because we know the braid's going to be too long, we're not going to worry about connecting it too tightly. So we're just going to put this on first. So the braid that we have, you can see, is that kind of the basalt material. It has a connection point on the distal end as well. And we just need to make sure we get that in the right place. So the braid, there's 4 layers of this. So inside the actual socket, there's 4 layers of the material. We turn this all the way inside out, as you can see on the inside. And then we're just going to line this up in order to get the correct alignment I'm going to hold it in place, and Katie's just going to roll up those 4 layers for me to make sure they're nice and flat before we trim it. That's 2. And the reason why we have 4 layers is to get the strength of the actual socket itself. So we want to make sure that these sockets are not only light but also as strong at the same time, because they obviously have to last no matter what activity people do with them. So they're all CE mark sockets as well, so they're in-house tested too. So once we have the braid lying nice and flat all the way over, next thing we're going to do is find the very top edge of that silicone brim that we popped on, and we're going to mark it with a marker pen so we can actually trim it to the correct length. So find the very top edge, and we're just going to kind of paint the pen all the way around, like so, to get rid of all the excess bulk in the actual material that we don't need. Nearly there. And we like to, we call this a prosthetist line, which is one line made up of many other lines, none of which I'll touch. If you're a technician, you'd understand what I mean. So in order to take this off, we just give it a push, then we just slide the braid away, and we just fold this in half now. And then you probably can't quite see on the camera, but we have some marks on the braid where I've actually, if I get it in the right light, get it in the marks where I've actually marked the braid to trim. So I'm just going to pop over to the bin, and we're just going to give that a very quick trim with some sharp scissors in order to get that to be the right length. So pop that. Okay, please hold on to the top end of that. That's perfect. With some sharp scissors, we just cut along the line that we've done over a bin, which is sometimes people's downfall because it all ends up all over the floor.
Not showing the bin.
If you're wondering what the noise is, it's me hacking through volcanic rock fibers with my sharp scissors. Okay, so we have now trimmed it, so you can see it's shorter, so I'll just use my marks that we have. But we're going to make this a sealing socket, so the thing that we mustn't forget is the valve former, and we're going to put that in place. So we have our lateral side, have a medial side, and then we're just going to go put that quite low down on the socket itself. Can't quite see where that's going, but it's in place, that's the main thing. And then we turn this once again inside out, but this time I'm actually going to physically connect it to Mitch's leg so that we know it's not going to move in terms of alignment. And with my connection piece, we're just going to screw that on nice and tight, like so. And then we're going to just one by one roll those layers of braid up again, making sure our valve former hasn't fallen out, which it hasn't, so that's good. Keep going. And one more. Okay. So the braid is now on the top of Mitch's leg, and the next thing we need to do is just get a second layer of insulating sheet, and we put that on the frame.
Okay, so?
Don't know, we'll see. I've only been practicing putting this on myself recently, so we'll see how strong I've got. Oh, look at that.
You have been working out.
It's not my first time. So pull that onto the frame. This time we're going to turn it inside out. So we're just going to give ourselves a bit of an overlap, and we're going to push kind of it down inside the frame itself. And then we have our lateral point marked again, but this time we're going to push this up over the top of the braids. And because we're kind of turning this inside out, Katie's going to really hold those braids nice and tight so that we can make sure that it doesn't start to slide off. So I'm just going to hold it at the bottom, start to roll it up, and when we've got going, just follow Katie's hands up, like so. And then eventually we have to take the frame away, and we can now see that we've sandwiched that braid between the 2 layers of silicone sheeting. We're going to use the same bungee cords as we did, so little tiny hole in the sheeting. So one at the back again, one at the front like before. I'll do that one. A bit of a pull, just hook it into that hole. And then finally one on the lateral side again as well. So just a little snip. It's quite strong, this sheeting, so no matter how close to the edge you go, it doesn't really make any difference. And we can now see we still have this kind of excess piece here. So we're going to use our specifically made isolation tools in order to isolate that. So we have 2 different sizes. We have a bigger, thinner one. This just stretches on around the top of the white disc, like so. And then we have actually got a groove in this white disc where the second one sits. And that just goes on in place. And then with some good old insulating tape, we just tape those 2 O-rings down nice and firmly to make sure that we don't get resin coming out of the bottom of the socket as we make it. So all the way around, we're going to go around 2 or 3 times just to really seal that bottom part off. Like so. Perfect, and then we just get rid of the tape just to make sure we can undo it again. And then finally, almost finally, we can trim off this excess sheeting all the way around. And that can go in the bin. And then, because we need to know where we need to get our resin to, we just need to put some marks on the outside of this sheet as well. If we have any creases on the inside of the socket, we can just pull them away. They're fine, that's no problem. So what we're going to do is mark not all the way to the top of the brim, but just halfway down to make sure that we get resin well flooded into that material section of the brim to make sure it's well bonded in, because we want this socket to last for a long time. So mark all the way around, thank you. Especially on the inside is the trickiest bit to get to make sure that's well covered. Perfect, so now when I string this out, I'll be able to tell where we actually need to get the resin to, which is just this line here as well. Next, we're going to inject the resin and start to string it. So first thing I do is I get a piece of string, basically, put it around my neck because I think I look really cool. And then we're going to get the injection gun. So this is the injection gun that we have here. It's just like any kind of silicone injection gun, but it just has 2 plunges basically. And this is what squeezes the resin in. And then finally our resin cartridge. It's a 2-part cartridge, so that's why we have 2 plungers. And this just slides into the injection gun. Slight amount of pressure just to keep it locked in place. And then we have that resin ready to go. It's quite a watery resin. You saw in the video it's quite easy to string around. So whenever we have to put it in the gun, always make sure to keep it pointing up, otherwise it starts to come out, and that's your 10 minutes started. So we pass this to your colleague, and then we're going to connect this to the distal part. So we have like one hole that we inject the resin into. So we're going to inject the resin through that one hole. So make sure that's well connected. And then Katie's going to start injecting, and I'm going to start the timer. So we have a 10-minute oven timer. So we have 10 minutes to go, so we know how long we have. So as it starts to go, perfect. Start that. And then once the resin has hit the socket, Katie just lifts up the cartridge just to keep the air at the top. We don't want to start injecting air into this. And hopefully you'll be able to see in a minute, you can just see where the resin's starting to appear around here. It's a hands-off process at the minute. I just want to make sure I get plenty of resin in there to play around with. So first of all, we're going to have a good half a cartridge's worth of resin. You can see it this is the line coming up here. Good half a cartridge's worth first, and then I'm going to spread it around with my hands to start off with. So a bit more. Okay, so now we're pretty much there. So I'm going to bring up all this resin, start to move it around nice and gentle. It's really quite a relaxing thing to do. It's quite satisfying to watch as well. Make sure that resin's well through that braid. We don't want to rush this because we want to make sure that it's well impregnated all the way around. And what you won't be able to tell, and nor can we, is that resin doesn't actually give off any fumes. So it's a sealed process, so it doesn't no fumes can escape. Also, the resin doesn't give off any fumes anyway. So we're just moving this around with our hands, making sure that we kind of get it to where we want it to go. And then another kind of 4 or 5 pumps, and then I'll just start to use my string in order to move this around. Perfect. Thank you. So Mitch knows exactly what's going on. So I string it up to my line, and then down again, up to my line and down again. So we're going to do this all the way around. And then I always find it easier if it's just me stringing, because what happens then is I don't miss any bits. Whereas if someone tries to help me, often find we have a dry spot. So once that's done, I'm just going to swap sides, so apologies if I stand in front of the camera. And we're just going to make sure that we have that resin all the way to the line that we've drawn to make sure that that brim is really well stuck in place. So we're nearly done, so that's probably enough resin, Katie.
Yeah,
so
and we've only taken 2 minutes so far.
2 minutes. So what we're going to do,
Today.
once this is strung out,
Yeah,
and I'm happy, yeah, we're going to disconnect, and then we can answer some questions which may be in the chat. So we have a special disconnection point as well, so that when we do disconnect that resin cartridge, we don't find that we have any drips coming out of it at all. So just moving the resin around where it needs to go. Perfect. So come out this side. So with our pliers, we have a special disconnection point here. So basically it's a metal O-ring that squashes the tube really. So squash it all the way along, both sides. And then with our snips, we just cut it and away we go. And just relax. And now I'm just gonna make sure that Mitch is nicely relaxed while I string all that resin through the braid, smooth it around the distal end to make sure it's well impregnated, all those fibres as well. So just going to hold on to that. Splendid. So just making sure it's gone through all that material part, because we want to make sure that this bit's really well flooded. And we've got, wow, loads of time. We're so fast today. Literally do this 4 times a week though, so that's
Yeah.
we're well practiced at
Well
it.
practiced.
And then we're just going to ask Mitch to push his leg backwards, and we can see now all these muscles are really starting to tense, so you can really feel where that kind of big muscle at the back of your leg is really starting to contract, and we're smoothing the resin around there to make sure that in the socket have a really nice relief for that muscle to contract and relax into. And then just relax again. Lovely. So carry on smoothing. So we don't want it fully tense, we don't want it fully relaxed, we just want a kind of a happy average of that muscle when it's tensed and when it's relaxed as well, to make sure that it's well accommodated in the shape of the socket too. And once more again, Mitch, leg backwards for me. Perfect. So not only do you get a nice warm leg, you also get a free massage. That's why Mitch keeps coming back. So as Katie said, Mitch has worn these sockets for 17 months. So any questions you have about sockets, then he'll be the one to answer them more than me. I can tell you about the process, but luckily don't have to wear one, but Mitch does, and has good things to say about it. So it's really.
And we have a couple of users on the chat as well who
Oh,
also
excellent. So
have a
that's
direct
good.
socket.
Okay, once more backwards. Lovely. And relax, and that's fine. Okay, any burning questions I can answer for the next 5 minutes, 15 seconds?
Yeah, so Leanna's asked, could you ever have a clear resin so you could see the nice bronze colour of the material?
Work in progress.
Trevor's asked, I've had one of these made, why is the thickness of the lip greater on the inside of the socket?
Because on the inside of the socket you have some adductor tendons. Those are the muscles that bring your leg inwards towards your midline. And it's there to, if you ever heard the term adductor roll, what it means is that there's soft tissue there that will kind of come out over the top of the socket edge. You just need to have it stiffer there to make sure that we keep all that soft tissue contained. We don't want that soft tissue to come out over the top of the socket because it causes more problems in the future. So it's thicker there for kind of adductor support, but it's thinner on the outside for cosmetic reasons, because obviously we don't want a big edge on the outside of your socket that will stick out your clothing.
Anne has asked, is this available on all the NHS at all centres?
We have, I say, we must have trained 40 NHS centres in this now, so yeah, there's nothing that says no. It does depend a little bit on the contractor that runs the service, I guess, but there's nothing that says you can't have this on the NHS, no, not at all.
Tracy has asked, is this process available to all levels of lower limb amputation?
Yes. So this is a transfemoral version. We also have a transtibial version as well. There's certain kind of amputations that are a bit trickier. So if, for example, you have like a bulbous residual limb, so kind of bigger at the bottom is in the middle, it's really hard or almost impossible to get the socket off. So something like a Symes would be almost impossible.
We have done it on knee disarticulation though.
Knee disarticulation, so through the knee joint, absolutely no problem at all. It's kind of each case is individual basis really, but we're always happy to try. that's what we say. Have a go. What's the worst that can happen? It works.
Yep. And then Christopher's asked, does this process rely on the patient wearing a silicone liner rather than a direct skin contact, i.e. no liner required, held on by negative pressure?
It's always worn with a liner, yes. That's kind of one of the contraindications, I guess, for this whole process. If someone can't wear a liner, then the socket's not for them. But yeah, it has to be worn with a liner. Yeah, because we have to make it over a liner, it has to be worn with a liner as well.
That's all your questions.
Oh wow, okay. 2 minutes 45 to go.
2 minutes of chat.
So the resin's starting to go a bit gooey now, so it's starting to solidify a little bit. So we don't want to do too much like stick our fingers in or anything like that, because we're letting the silicone sheet on the outside do all the work. So as the resin's cured, the silicone sheet has compressed Mitch's soft tissue to be the perfect volume, so it's a hands-off process. We're not kind of taking a plaster cast and taking this into the workshop or the plaster room and rectifying, so removing plaster to give it a kind of our best attempt at what we think would be the shape of the socket that we need. Shall I tell a joke?
No, not your jokes, no.
I don't have any anyway.
But yeah, going back to the training, I think we've got a few more centres booked in, haven't we? A few of the bigger ones, but most of them I think are either we have training planned or they've had training, and from our side, the training is it's about a day and a half at each centre. So obviously it's quite a big uptake by the centres to obviously have those days out of clinic, and the idea with the training is really that we just try and repeat this process as much as we can, just so that the prosthetists, physios, technicians are all really comfortable with the process. And then our facility that we have here, we quite often will then join some of their subsequent fittings virtually, or again we can go back in person, and that's sometimes Ollie will go back to help with the prosthetist, or Rachel, our physio, will go back to support the therapy team. So we can really be super flexible with whatever the centres need in terms of their training and support.
Anya has another question.
Yeah, staying on training, Kirsty has asked, has any of the prosthetists in Northern Ireland attended the training?
Not yet.
They have a session, I think theirs is going to be booked, off the top of my head, I think it's September. So I think we were trying to go early on, but actually getting to Belfast, you remember? I think we were struggling with, was it flights with some of the companies that we could get to anymore, and then we couldn't get into Belfast, so I think we are booked for September, so yeah, soon.
Yep, and then Anne has asked, is the inner liner longer than the outer?
Inner liner longer than the outer. So the liner that you wear on your leg, it can be cut wherever's comfortable really. It's normally just above that flexible brim, so the liner's just outside it. Otherwise it tends to get eaten a little bit as time goes on. Some people like to fold it over the top edge as well. There's not really any need to do that so much now because it's flexible anyway, but the choice is yours really. There's no right or wrong about that. You can do whatever you like. Yeah.
Yep, Christopher's asked, does the soft brim not lead to the patient's skin bulging over when the patient stands and in use with the downward patient's weight?
The soft brim's actually there to contain that soft tissue. So yes, it does move, but so does our soft tissue as well. So it's there not only for comfort, but the snugness of the brim also helps you activate your hip muscles as well. So the brim does move, but that's what makes it comfortable. If it was in a fixed container and your soft tissue was trying to expand, there's nowhere for it to go. That's where sore parts come from. So yes, it absolutely does bulge in and out, but it's there to contain it. So it's never overspilling over the top. It's just nicely contained in that brim.
I guess we'll see that with Mitch.
We'll see that
As
with
I
Mitch when he
walk.
puts it on, yeah.
Sorry, got one more.
Yep.
The flexible brim is bonded in, so how long is that likely to last? I get through ice frost liners very quickly, and if the brim is damaged, that will mean a new socket.
It depends a little bit. If it's looked after well, so it's always folded back on itself when you don the socket and then you push down and then fold it up again, it's actually very, very strong. The biggest killers of brims are prosthetists that carry their legs to the workshop holding the soft brim. That can obviously pull it out as well. But the reason, I'm just assuming here, the reason you might get through ice frost liners is because of the hard top edge of the socket, which is now no longer existing. So the liners should last a lot longer at the same time. Cool. Has the beeper gone?
The beeper's gone, yeah.
Excellent. So quick tap to check that the resin is set. First thing we do is carefully disconnect the bungee cords, like so. Zip it out of the way. Then we're just going to use our handy tape tab I made in order to remove the blue tape from the distal end of the silicone sheeting, like so. Thank you. Then we take off our black O-rings. So the reason we take these off now is so they don't get kind of caught up in all the silicone sheeting and thrown away. Then we take our top layer of silicone away, so we'll be able to see the socket is now set and solid, like so. And then we just disconnect our distal ends next, so we can actually take the socket away. So we unscrew our connection piece, and then also we take this metal pin out too, in order to make sure that we don't get that stuck as we're making the socket. So that just gets disconnected, like so. Then next thing we do, we just hold the top edge of the silicone sheeting, hold the bottom of the socket, and the whole thing just slides away. And then just move our tools out of the way. So Katie's just going to look after Mitch. So obviously, one thing not to forget is that patients probably want to sit up, so we're just going to get rid of all that plastic. And then on the inside of the socket, we're now going to have a look at what we've made. So we can see on the inside, we now have that brim well bonded in. And if we pull that kind of brim back from the edge, like we have, let's do it from here, it's a bit easier. You can now see that it's well stuck in, there's none of that material part left. So we have that all the way around. So it's really nicely stuck in. And then you can see that we have too much kind of braid over the top of that flexible part. So all that happens is we take that to the workshop and we trim it down to that edge. And then we have one that when it comes back looks like this. So we have one that's made. This is one that's made already. So it's nicely trimmed all the way down because the resin doesn't actually stick to this part, which means we can peel that braid off, keep it out of the way, and then trim around the edge as well. Thank you. So all we do is that goes into the workshop. Your technician would trim all that off for you. We have this, still have these metal parts, sorry, this plastic white disc on the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're just going to undo the screws that we held that on with a 5mm Allen key, like so. 'Cause this is just kind of our isolation parts really to make sure that none of the holes get full of resin if we do use too much. And then finally, with the kind of bit that we had injected through, we just use our pliers in order to take that away, like so. So we're just going to just give that a squeeze and pull that off, and that just goes in the bin as well. And then the white disc should just come off. Might need a bit of a tap with my pliers, like so. And now we have the kind of the bare metal part on the bottom where we have all the options to connect our different adapters to as well. You can see this little kind of injection piece here. This is where we actually injected the resin through. Because we're not using a lock today, we're going to use a sealing liner. We don't actually need that. So the best thing to do with this is literally just snap that straight off. We're going to leave some resin in the hole where it was injected through, just to make sure that the hole is now well sealed. So the reason why I have so many holes on the bottom is to make sure that when we do attach the knee joint and everything to this, we actually have the correct alignment so we can actually get some shift if needs be. So if Mitch needs a bit more kind of shift to the outside of his leg, we actually have that as an option as well. So you can see I have quite a lot of options on the bottom of the socket in order to get the correct alignment. Actually, it's really neat too because all your alignment will be from the socket rather than kind of an adapter, then some shift, and then everything down from beneath that too. You have to take my word for it, the sockets are really lightweight, but Mitch will be able to attest to that too. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask Mitch to just pop his socket on so you can see how that flexible edge works. Might just rearrange the cameras a little so we can all see what's happening. Can you pop it on that side of the couch? Is that all right if I just bring this around this way?
Got a couple more questions if you want.
Yeah,
just now.
yeah. Let's hear them.
Is this available for lower limb and not upper? That's from David. So I can probably answer that, David, because I look after upper limb in the UK. So we do have a project at the moment for upper limb direct sockets. So hopefully in time that will come. We don't see any reason. It's just more getting the components small enough to actually be able to use it on upper limb. A question from Anne Ollie. I can understand that a soft top is comfortable, but how does it support the weight bearing point?
Now that's a different thing. There is no weight bearing point. By the method that we've used, all that compression turns your leg into a completely weight bearing surface. So actually load is taken everywhere, not just on one point. So by this was kind of first studied when the Istros liners first came out in the 1980s. So if you compress a fixed volume to a certain pressure, it will become a load-bearing surface, and that's what we have with this. So there's no load-bearing point anymore. It's just the fact that the volume is matched to the patient, and then by that amount of compression, it means that what supports your weight. So it's quite clever, but it's not a new thing. It's been around for some time.
David just making a comment that he has a similar socket to this, but it was made using lasers.
Excellent.
Sounds good. And is this available to NHS Wales? Yes, we've been to all 3 NHS centres, and they've been using them quite frequently. And in fact, Mitch is actually a user of
Wrexham.
NHS Wrexham,
Yep.
where we first met. So
maybe if Giles, can you just zoom in a bit on that brim? Sorry for. There we go, perfect. So we can see now Mitch has a socket on. The brim is nicely in contact with his leg. So if he just moves around a little bit, we can see how much that brim actually moves. So with him, so you no longer get anything stuck out of your clothes. You can actually see at the back there that he's not sat on anything. It's just underneath his ischium, so underneath his sitting bone normally. But with the brim the way it is, just take your weight up and down for me. You can see that actually does move, but it's designed to. And the reason was, if that didn't move, that would be quite uncomfortable now, because all that soft tissue has to go somewhere. So being contained by that brim just makes it really nice and comfy as well. If Mitch has a sit down, don't know if this is a bit high, maybe make it a bit lower. Just so, because sitting comfort is one of those things. If Mitch has a sit down, he actually sits on his bum. So rather than sitting on a hard edge of the socket at the back, there we go, perfect. Yeah, it's coming. Perfect. So rather than sitting a hard edge of the socket at the back, you can see Mitch is actually sat on his actual soft tissue here, makes it really comfy. Also, when he is sat, that brim will also conform to the shape that we have as well. So there's no danger that air can get in or out of the socket. There's no gaps down the front that sometimes people have as well, because that brim's moving all the time, which is what it's designed to do as well.
And Leanne can confirm that. She said her favourite part was sitting down on a chair in the new socket. No loss of suction and comfortable to sit.
Which is exactly what we're after at any given point, really. Maybe Mitch, could you say a few words about your first thoughts when, like, over the time you've had Direct Socket? How was the breaking in process for you?
It's because it fits the way that it does. It fits like a glove in effect, rather than a glove that's too big. It does take some time to work it in. It's like breaking in a new pair of shoes, really, but the part that you break in is your leg rather than your shoe. But once your leg has molded to whatever socket that you've got, you get a reduction and a pressure, and then it molds and gives you a perfect fit. And for the feeling for me when I first had it was like I'd spent 18 months, 2 years on other sockets, and I felt I said to Ollie and Katie that it felt like I was connected to my leg for the first time since I had my amputation. So for me, it's been initially it was hard work, and because it's a different type of socket, you've got to use different type of muscles, but it makes you use the muscles that you were using before you had your amputation more. So it's made me more mobile. It's allowed me to experience different things that I wouldn't have done with the old traditional sockets, and it's given me the confidence to go and do lots and lots of different things. So it's changed my life, and it's changed my ability to look forward to different things in my life. But it is hard work at the beginning.
I think that's one of the things that we do go through a lot on training as well with patients, is kind of the physiotherapy side of things. We have a physio that works with us, Rachel, who's unfortunately on holiday today, but there is an element of physio involved as well. And people may have tried kind of Sub-Scule sockets before, but literally not had any physiotherapy, and that's probably where it's all fallen down. There is a different way of walking. It does take a little bit of time to get used to, but the benefits that you get once you've kind of been through that breaking in process are absolutely huge. And we do over egg it a little bit. Sometimes people put it on, they just go and they're absolutely fine. Sometimes people take a few weeks to adjust. It's the same with any new socket or any new socket system as well.
Question from Clifton regarding adjustment of the socket. What can we do once it's made?
So it depends kind of a little bit on what type of liner that you need. So if it's adjustment for volume, we'd probably use a slightly different type of liner you can use with socks, and you can expand the seal a little bit as well. Also, locking liners are quite good for using socks with to expand the volume too. But there should be no need to adjust it in terms of fit, because we've just made it on the patient. So there's no danger that it's not going to fit, because we have just made it there and then. We're not taking a cast a day, fitting it in 2 or 3 weeks time, and then finding things have changed once the socket gets delivered. It's literally in the morning, we'll make the socket, trim it, deliver it, done. It always works like that as well.
And a question from Tracy, who's a bilateral below knee. As you have just mentioned, weight is distributed evenly. I can imagine this helps with standing, as that is her main struggle.
Mitch, care to answer that? How's standing comfort for you?
I tend to find that I stand more on my prosthetic than I do on my, well, if you want to put it that way, good leg. It's comfortable. I don't have any problems. As I say, it's a totally different way of being able to walk and stand. So you've got to try and adapt. If you're not willing to put the work in, then I suppose it's like anything, it's not going to work. But you've got to make the effort. So your core will change, which means that you're more stable from the waist up. You're not balanced trying to catch yourself all the time. And I've got to say, I walk between 4 and 6 kilometres a day, and I've walked up to 11.5 kilometres, and I don't have any problems at all. You do get, sometimes it is a little bit tight in the morning, dependent on the weather, because initially it's such a good fit. So, with the fact that your volume changes with due to climate, heat, cold, I can sometimes feel a little bit swollen in the morning, but within a matter of minutes, I've got back into it and it's fine. So I wear this. I'm up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I wear this until I go to bed at night, and I don't take it off.
Great. Thank you. And one more question from Christopher. With this time-saving benefit and one-shot process, is there a threat to the technicians to reduce numbers needed in the workshop?
No, absolutely not, because most of the time people will do this with a technician, because technicians are really great at stringing out resin, they're really great at trimming, doing all the manufacturing and bolting together as well. So what it does actually give is prosthetists more time to maybe see the more complicated patients that aren't suitable for this, rather than trying to reduce technicians in the workshop. We still need technicians for lots of other things. This is just another tool in someone's box at the end of the day. We're not saying it's suitable for everyone, but for quite a lot of people it does solve a lot of the problems in terms of what they're having with socket comfort and socket fit as well. So no, absolutely need the technicians, probably need more technicians as well, and they are really good at helping with this whole process too.
And I think it's been great in the centres, isn't it, having all the team together during the training, and I think they've all found it, I think we've maybe not said it yet, but it's actually quite a fun process, and it's brought all the teams together, so they've actually really enjoyed it. Angela just said, really interesting, I want one. In a word, the main pros versus cons on this socket from Ryan. I don't know if that's to you, Mitch, maybe first?
From the process of right from the start to the finish, traditionally it would take 10 to 12 weeks. In that time, my volume could change. I had to travel backwards and forwards for check sockets, different fittings, and if my volume had changed and it wouldn't fit, I'd have to have another cast in. So in regard to patient side of things, for me, I was traveling an hour to the hospital and then an hour back, and perhaps a couple of hours while I was there. So that's a massive benefit, because you're in effect an hour later, you're out with something that fits perfectly. From a point of view of progressing from that initial fitting, it's made me more active, it's made me more positive about what I can do. It allows me to do more, and it, if anything, although it's a static object, it makes you want to do more, because it's more comfortable, and it's more secure. It feels a lot more secure I mean, admittedly, I've still got to move my leg, but it feels as though it's underneath me.
But if you had to use one word.
Oh, just one word. Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Any more?
I don't think I've got any. And I know that some people may think differently, but I've got to say I don't have any negatives whatsoever to say about it. And although I would never look at it as a negative, right at the beginning, you've got to work at it. And if you're not willing to work at it, then there's no point in having it.
Great. Yeah, just other good feedback, I think, just about people who maybe have had a socket or have enjoyed the session. I think there was one question about how to get in touch with us. So we're more than happy, either through Clifton or Leanne, if you want to get in touch with myself or Ollie. We can certainly try and answer as many questions as we can, and also we can get in touch with Mitch on your behalf as well. So if you have any more questions, I know it's quite short on time, but I hope we've kind of covered lots of aspects of direct socket for you.
Short on time, we did make a whole socket.
Well, yeah, but I'm just thinking there's maybe going to be a few questions, or maybe when you go away and have a think about it. But yeah, please feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for. And again, if we can support you with any of your questions to your limb centres as well, we're more than happy to do that. And also for future sessions, if there's something else you would like to see from our portfolio, you can see the setup we have here now. We can bring users in and hopefully bring you some more educational information. So we're open to ideas, so please feel free to either leave it in the chat box or get in contact with us.